Gets it off in time, and he's got it, baby! Big time Nets win!
Oof, the only net fans you know? The only Nets fans you know? Man. I mean, come on, man. Or are these guys?
Welcome back to the Only Net Fans You Know podcast. I'm Peter. Welcome to episode number 81, Off-Season Chronicles. Today, I'm joined by the great Doug Norrie from Locked On Nets. How's it going, bro?
Oh, the great. Yeah, I'll take that. Like, you need to have other people intro into my regular life with the great right in front of it before I do other stuff. Yeah, good to be here. Can't wait to talk some Nets.
All right, man. Let's just jump straight into it. I've taken a little 2-week vacation, so I'm going to do just a little wrap up since the last time I've had a podcast on. I saw that the Suns got swept. One of the James Harden traded picks became the 3rd overall pick this year. I believe it was supposed to be 9th overall, and then it jumped all the way up to 3. But what are your first thoughts looking at that?
I mean, like with the Nets, it felt like sort of a foregone conclusion only because when you live in like sort of the schadenfreude that is the Nets, you kind of expect the worst is going to happen. So it wasn't, I mean, it's surprising in the sense that probabilistically it felt like they ran bad, but then just by the way that things have just sort of turned out for this organization over the years, it's like, well, could it have gone any other way? It feels like no. So it feels like that had the spike to as high as possible. So, I mean, at this point, it kind of just is what it is. But I will say in the moment, it was one more referendum on like this one. I mean, maybe it won't even be the last either, but this like final nail in the coffin of just like how bad the Nets have run in terms of just different moves over the last couple years. And some things just aren't their fault. Like, but having that spike all the way to 3 was a nice little gut punch for Nets fans that probably just didn't need it at this point.
There are a number of teams that have their offers ready.
Are the Lakers one of them?
They're ready, of course.
The Lakers?
Absolutely.
The Knicks?
I don't think the Knicks are trying to win this Eastern Conference
Understood.
Series, but certainly across the river there in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn. So we'll keep a close eye on that.
Everyone's on the Donovan Mitchell watch. Cavs get knocked out in 5 games. Donovan Mitchell's hurt, but he had a great playoff run this year. 10 games, he put up 29 points, 47% from the field, 35% from 3, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal a game. All of a sudden, JB Bickerstaff is on the hot seat. Garland wants out. People don't like Jarret Allen. Another report that says Spider wants to go to Miami. What's your take?
Well, I'm of two minds on this because we, in Nets content world, you got to kind of just dissect everything as finely as possible. Mostly because when you're out of the playoffs, and you don't have draft picks, there's only so many ways for it to go. But my stance on Mitchell is the Nets could clearly use him. He's like sort of one of the like exact kind of guy they would need, right? Like on-ball creator, dynamic offensive presence, can step up in big moments. I mean, really just like offensive ball creation is the thing that they desperately lacked all season long. And that's even with Cam Thomas. Like they just need significantly more. He would solve a lot of that. I don't think there's any question that getting Mitchell would instantly make them a better team. So there's no pushback for me there. My biggest problems with the Mitchell talk, and I think we've been pretty resolute around this really since the beginning, is that you have to factor in price. And if the price is going to gut you take away the ability to get better in other ways after Mitchell gets here, then it's just not worth it at that point. And so you'd be nuts to think that Donovan Mitchell doesn't make your team better. You're not saying that, but I just like anybody else that's out there that would say that. It's just that I get a little worried about these situations where one, the guy's an impending free agent, right? He's got the option, but there's no way he's picking it up. And then 2, you a little bit or a lot of it rob Peter to pay Paul because you're sending out all the other pieces that would make the team better once you have this guy in the building. So that's kind of where I stand on Mitchell. I'm unchanged around that. Like his playoff performance, it even him getting hurt. Like that doesn't change. That never really changed my opinion of all the situation. I just get so worried that the Nets are going to use these pretty good assets that they have somehow clawed back following some disasters. And then if they were to just ship it out with no other way with not a lot of other avenues to get better for a guy like Mitchell, like I don't think Mitchell is that guy. He's great, but to get like to ship everything else out, the guy has to be like one level above Mitchell, I think. Like Giannis or these guys aren't available, but like Luka or guys like this that are on that next level. I just don't think Mitchell's on that level. So, I mean, but look, we talk Nets every day. Would I rather have Donovan Mitchell out there for a guy to podcast about 82 games a year? Of course. Like that one would be fine from that standpoint.
I have a couple people I talk to, and I have to be very careful because I made about 2 or 3 proclamations that have been wrong after people have told me it's a lock that I could run with it. So guys, take this how you want. This is what I heard. And this was 2 weeks ago, that they're pretty much the Cavs are going to go all in to try to keep the guy. I don't think that's anything crazy. He's going to pick the new coach. I don't think that's anything crazy. But what I did hear about before that tweet that I think Shams put out was that Garland, he wants out if they're going to make Mitchell the point guard. He may want to go to run his own team. And I bring up the fact that, man, he would look pretty good in Brooklyn. Would you rather have Garland on the Nets or Mitchell on the Nets?
Oh, again, this is like a non-answer, but it all comes down to cost. I think Garland would be cheaper to get only because the contract goes out further and there's more risk there because it's a little less clear what he is. He's younger, but $45 million 4 years from now could look bad. Probably not, but he's just not Donovan Mitchell. So I do think the cost would probably be lower just because he makes a lot of money. He was kind of underwhelming this year. I probably would think about doing this just because of the age, and I think he's shown enough. He had a down year this year. He had some weird injuries. I don't know, like maybe the pairing with Mitchell clearly wasn't perfect for him. I'm not so low on him at this point, but he's definitely the kind of guy the Nets need. I just he's another worry that it's like, okay, well, do you want $45 million Darius Garland in his age 28 season if he doesn't make dramatic improvements from here on out? That's could be a tough sell too. And I just think that the Nets I kind of just feel like they wouldn't get into that business. That's my gut feeling on that. What do you think?
I'm totally all in on Garland, actually. I think he still has that potential. He's already been an all-star. We have Mikal Bridges, who has not been an all-star yet, right? Right. I've even seen some ideas. I floated this out. Like, how would you feel about a Garland for Bridges type deal? I feel like there's a lot of different avenues the way that the Nets could go with this. What's that thing that we've been hearing that Mitchell is a big fan of Bridges? Imagine instead of having Mitchell coming to Brooklyn, you have Bridges going out to Cleveland.
I don't know. They seem so set on Mitchell. I will say we said the same thing on our pod too about Garland, is that you do forget the exact thing too. Like, you do forget he was an all-star. He's a year removed from shooting 41% from three. He was bad this year. Like, he basically broke his face. Like, he had issues. There was clearly some of the reporting came out that these guys probably just weren't getting along either, which is a problematic thing too. Like, only because it took about 1.1 seconds for everyone to throw the other guy under the bus as soon as the season ended. So as soon as all the stories were already written, they get eliminated and instantly everyone hates each other, which is just a sign that it was kind of going bad for a while. So this is what I said before. Like, I don't put a ton of stock in Garland's having a little bit of a down season here. It's just like the money, and maybe the contract doesn't look too bad in a couple years, right? Like, maybe a couple years the cap goes up and all of a sudden that contract just looks perfectly reasonable. And you, like you said, you have a all-star on your team. And if he's running the show, then it's just a little bit of a different situation. I mean, they clearly wouldn't be a championship level team,
no,
but they would be a playoff team probably in the East if you could add another piece. And again, I think that the price would be cheaper for him than it would be for Mitchell. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not. I've heard people just kind of like, I know I know everyone kind of, the last thing they see is the thing that kind of influences them from time immemorial, right? And Mitch and Garland kind of sucked at the end of that Boston series, but it just doesn't really affect me too much.
Another thing that I look with Garland, I think the age is a lot better suited for to kind of build around him if you are a believer in him, right? Maybe the Nets aren't even interested in him. Maybe the Nets want like a Trae Young type guy. But the way that I look at it, I think the way to put a pin on this whole Donovan Mitchell thing is he's going to go where he's going to go, right? He's going to pick his own place. If he wants to come back to New York and it's going to be the Nets, he'll make it known to Cleveland. And I have people telling me he wants out, but then I look at the roster, I look at them being able to offer him the most money. I'm like, man, you're really going to leave Cleveland for the Nets? I can see him going for Miami maybe, because I think Miami's the best run organization in basketball, so I could see that in a way. But could you see Mitchell coming to the Nets?
I don't know. I think so. Sometimes, I mean, maybe you'd feel the same way. I feel sometimes I get a little too close to this situation in terms of just talking about it every single day. Where I'll tell you, one of my biggest L's I'll take is that I was like, who's going to want to coach the Nets? This was like an all-time bad take of mine, and whatever, leave it up, learn to do better. But it was because I was like, who's going to want to coach the Nets? I mean, like, look at this team and the roster, and like, just like they don't know if they're coming or going, and then they hired a really high level candidate in 2 seconds. And I was like, okay, I misjudged this. I thought I've been spending too much time thinking about this team, and I'm just like not judging it holistically, like from a bird's eye view better. So that's where I kind of, because my gut is, oh yeah, why would Mitchell do it? But then I already know I was wrong once about this. And so that's really starting to influence my takes going forward about that. So I agree with you on a gut level, but my gut's been really wrong about that before.
What do you think about Jarret Allen coming back?
I mean, they have to send Claxton out because they can't play them together. And if you could sign and trade Claxton and then bring Allen back with like Garland or Mitchell or something like that, I'm assuming you're pairing Allen with. Or is that like? Sorry, I'm putting this word in. Are you pairing them with one of the? Are you pairing him as like a bigger deal as part of one of those guys? Okay, so I actually don't know if I would do it without one of the guys. If you could, I just don't think it like solves anything for you, and so I think he's better than Claxton at some things, and Claxton's better than him at other things, and so I just don't. And neither one can like affect the game on their own. In a like a really dynamic way, like most centers can't, except for like Jokic or Embiid or whatever. But so I just don't. I think that would be kind of a lateral move. I have thought about though the worlds where those guys sort of get paired together in some huge blockbuster thing, and now all of a sudden you're really kind of like reshaping your team. It's definitely less likely just because the contracts and all this other stuff. But yeah, the Cavs are in a fascinating spot because they really do have multiple ways to go. I ultimately think they're going to hitch their wagon to Garland and Mobley, and they're going to trade Mitchell and Allen. That's what I think is going to happen. Just because Mobley and Garland are kind of lined up along the same age curve. But yeah, I would take Allen back, but I wouldn't just be like a solo move. I just don't know. For me, I'm just not sure why that would like sort of move the needle for the Nets.
I'll tell you why. He put up 20, like almost 20 and 10, maybe even like 20 and 9 or something like that, right? Already had an all-star year about a year ago. The reason why I would take him over Claxton is because I think Claxton is going to get a humongous deal. I don't know if he's going to get a near max now, but I don't think 25 million, 30, maybe even closer to 30 million if the Nets get pushed a little bit is that crazy. You have Jarret Allen at 20 million. Like I said, he's putting up 20 and 10. He's good on the interior. And I would like to see something like that if it could be at a significant, cheaper cost. Man, I'm just not really big into the whole Claxton sweepstakes right now. What do you think about all that?
With you on the not wanting to sort of overpay on Claxton. It feels like so far into the Nets MO is that they just maybe you disagree with this, and maybe this is another one of just like talking about the team all the time. They seem to overvalue their guys to like sort of an alarming degree. Like they seem to just, ever since the Durant trade, it really feels like they just have unrealistic expectations around their own players' value compared to how the rest of the team views it. And you can kind of see this, how other things shook out, right? Not trading Dorian Finney-Smith at this point. Now, maybe they see him as part of like a group going forward, taking a little too long to trade some other guys, right? Like if there's any truth to the idea that they could have gotten all the stuff back from McHale, I think that probably was a mistake. So I just feels like Cam Johnson, they paid him a decent sized contract when really no one else was bidding for him. And so except for Detroit maybe. And so worry that the Claxton thing is going to fall into these same lines where it's like, is anyone really coming out of the woodwork to pay Claxton $23 million a year? Or are you going to end up paying that because you kind of want to keep the good vibes going with your guys after a total S show when it came to like Durant and Kyrie and Harden and stuff? And so I that's kind of where I a little bit worry that the Claxton thing is going to fall into those lines. It's like they just want to see them repaint themselves as a team that players can trust. And I just worry that it's going to be like money that no one else would give them. Maybe not. But that's kind of, I mean, I don't, do you think that way? That's kind of how it feels like it's going. It's like they're going to pay the most against bidding against nobody, or not. Okay. Not bidding against nobody, bidding against teams that wouldn't have come close to that number.
I don't know. You can look along the league, right? There's not a lot of teams that actually need a center. There's maybe about 2 or 3 teams that you could say would be a threat to the Nets to sign Claxton. I feel like if you let him go, it's more of like losing an asset. You have this guy, he's still young, and he's going to be 25 next year. Just a year ago, 2 years ago, we were saying, oh man, he could have been a defensive player of the year. And now you're going to let him walk. I feel like there's a lot of that, as well as what you say, that they kind of value their guys a little bit too much, maybe. It's so tough when it comes to a guy like Claxton, because I feel like so many teams value him differently than us. If you look at analytics, he's like an analytics god. And then some teams that they don't think he's that special.
Yeah.
Where do you think Claxton falls overall when everything's said and done?
I mean, if you have like the other thing, it's not his fault, right? The other reason he kind of gets dinged is because like the Nets have now played basically a whole season without a point guard. And when you don't have like a high end pick and roll point guard, like where he can rim run and really be athletic, like that is just going to make him look worse. But that's going to make most centers look worse. And so that's really not his fault. And I do think he gets dinged. The Nets have been woefully mismanaged when it came to the roster, and especially around that part of it. Like, it didn't look even that bad when they would allow Dinwiddie to run a lot of pick and roll, but then they just stopped allowing him to do that, or he chose not to, or whatever it was that ended up being the case. And so the second that stops, Claxton looks way worse. By the way, like most centers would look worse, right? Most centers are going to look bad if you don't have a pick and roll offensive generator that can punish the first defender and then make the second defender think about it, right? And then he can get to the rim, or he can kind of like, go up for lob finishes. He can offensive rebound better because like someone's overcommitted on the PNR. So that is not his fault. I think Claxton is good, by the way. It's actually not against him. It's just about building the team going forward, that it just doesn't feel like the archetype of a guy you overpay. It's more that he's good. I'm a Claxton fan. I think he's an incredible switch defender. I think if you want to run a switching scheme, like if you have DFS and bridges and stuff, you do want to switch. And he works really, really well into that. The offensive thing is not his fault. Like they just have, has any team had worse point guard play over the last year than the Nets? Like probably not. And so and that's just going to make most centers look bad. So anyway, I think I went a little long there. I can't remember exactly what your first question was, but I think he gets a bum rap because the rest of the roster just look bad. Like another thing too that hurts him is that they always play with they play so much with undersized fours. So then he gets switched onto a guard, and then the 4 gets brutalized. And then it looks like their interior defense isn't that good because you got like Cam Johnson getting switched onto you. And then most guys are going to punish that. So I think those parts of the game aren't really his fault, right? And so I think just with a better scheme and like slightly better personnel, I don't think there'd be any questions. Man, never mind. I talked myself into Claxton. Go ahead and sign him. Like I think he got a bum rap.
Man, I'm so happy you said all that, because I was thinking about this. Did Clowney just give Claxton an extra couple $1 million on his contract for those last couple games? Like let's be honest. Do I think Sean Marks is saying, "Oh my God, look how great they're playing together. I'm going to pay this guy more"? No, we know small sample sizes are a thing, but man, those two guys playing together look very good. And maybe you talk yourself into saying, man, maybe a full season of Clowney instead of having, like you said, a Cam Johnson, maybe these guys could really do something together. Do you think he got
You know what? Yeah. I just forgot about it's so crazy. I just forgot about Clowney for a second when I was thinking about this. You're right. Because if you look at them playing the time that they played together, Clowney and Claxton, the numbers were really good. I mean, that's like a 109 defensive. I mean, it's only about 100 minutes, but it was like a 109 defensive rating. Okay, fair enough. 113 offensive. And that is the sort of stretch guy that could make up for some of that stuff. That's kind of in some ways what Cleveland dreamed on for Allen and Mobley, except Mobley just couldn't hit threes. All of a sudden, if Clowney can hit those threes, yeah, maybe you're right. I kind of had washed my brain out of having Noah Clowney being the 4, just because I wasn't really expecting him to start. But if they went that direction, that's a devastating switchable 4-5 combination defensively. So yeah, maybe he did get him paid a little bit more because they know they can pair him with him.
But would you be comfortable with Clowney starting at the 4 next year?
That's interesting. I would. Yeah, I think he showed enough. I don't think they will, though, if they keep the same roster, because everyone, I think egos and other stuff will get in the way. You have these other veterans, who are you going to not start? Cam Johnson and DFS?
Yep.
You run into these other issues of who you don't start. Nets have these problems, too, where they had a bunch of just decent role players and veterans, and then you kind of couldn't play some other guys because of maybe, personalities and stuff and egos, not even egos, just contracts, money you gave to people and who's been in the league longer. I think he was good enough to start. I do wonder if that has them move some of these other guys, but yeah, I don't know. I would start him, but I actually don't think he will, though, for that reason I just said. I think he won't start for the reason I just said, but he probably could stand to start. Just based on talent and what he showed at the end of the season. It's sort of where the Nets are. I don't think it would cost them anything to start him at this point. I think he showed enough late in the season. Do you think? I mean, what do you think? Does that sound correct?
Okay. So I'll say this: if they're going to get a Donovan Mitchell, I don't think you're going to see Clowney starting at the 4. But if they bring back the roster, like you said, absolutely. And I think it would be a disservice not to start Clowney, because listen, are we going to go for a championship next year? No, we aren't. Realistically, we're not. So if you're not gonna give this time to these guys, the younger guys, to grow a little bit, then what are we doing? We're just kind of caught in limbo, just like last year. No?
Yeah, and I actually think that this year we were pretty adamant about this. I think that I was fine with how the Clowney situation played out this year. I like that they kind of were out of it by the time that they brought him in. I think that was a good landing, like a soft landing for him.
Yeah.
That the games didn't really matter by the time he hit the court, and then he wasn't really fighting for playing time. He wasn't, there was no talk about whether he should be playing or not. They kind of just waited till it was over and then brought him up. I actually thought that ended up being correct, because it just allowed for best foot forward in terms of confidence. You're not going to get benched if you miss an assignment. You're not going to get benched if you make a mistake. You can miss some threes and you're not going to get benched. I think that maybe would not have been the case had he come in when they were kind of still in it and still needed to win games, or thought they needed to win games. So I actually think from that standpoint, it worked out really well. I agree with you. If the roster stayed the same, you'd have to really think about it. This is why the roster has to change, right? They just have these weird overlapping pieces. Guys block other guys, and then they don't have anybody in other spots, like point guard, really. I mean, Dennis Schroeder's fine, but they just have so many. The roster's just so weird at this point. It's bad. It's so non-complimentary. Everyone's miscast, right? And it just causes problems for everyone else. So if they go into the next season the same, I think we're going to just see the same result. They're going to stink. But I don't also see tons of ways out of it. And then maybe that's why they end up overpaying for a guy like Mitchell, just because they see that same way. Is that if they roll into the next season with the same roster, they're going to win 30 games again. I actually don't see many ways around that.
Yeah, the position that I think I'm most concerned about, believe it or not, might be point guard. I'm actually a big Schroeder fan, but let's face it, after last year, it's kind of exposed the Nets how badly you need a point guard with this team. They need somebody who can get his own bucket. Schroeder's getting a little older now. I don't know if he has that first step like he did a couple years ago when he was in, young gun in Atlanta. I just don't know where they could move to kind of get an upgrade.
I just think they have their eyes so set on not this season, but the next season when their cap's totally clean. And it's just going to be basically like Mitchell it'll probably be Mitchell under contract, Cam Johnson under contract, and maybe Claxton. And that's going to be it. And Simmons is off. Like everyone else is gone. Maybe they've extended Cam at that point. Maybe they traded him. I just think they have they're so dead set on what the cap situation looks like in 25, 26. That's probably what stopped them from like considering these other moves, right? Is that they just they want to have all that cap space for the hope that some of these big names hit that season in free agency, or like at least one or two of them hit, and they're a cool looking destination. So I think like that's actually why I'm against like that's why I don't even think they'd do the Garland thing. I think they would like screw up that plan, right? Of having as much salary cap room to move as possible. And so I think that's what stops them. But it is so clear. They just need a primary ball handler that can create and distribute and beat his man. I was watching with my kid the other day. We talk about this in the podcast all the time. Like my kids and my wife, like no one in my house watches basketball. Like you'd be shocked at how little they know. They know nothing, right? I usually watch like in my office or like like I just watch at other places and not around them. But I was watching with my kid the other day. We were watching some playoffs, and I actually can't remember who we were watching. But maybe it was the Knicks when it was the Knicks when Brunson was off the court, and my daughter was like, "Man, they can't do anything. They can't get near the basket." And I was like, again, she doesn't know anything. But I was like, yeah, they can't because they don't have a guy who can beat their man. I was like, the most important thing in the NBA, it's so simple. It's hard, but it's so simple. The most important thing in the NBA is for at least to have multiple guys who can beat their primary defender, right? There's all the other stuff. You can run all the actions in the world, run pistol, veer, blind pig. I mean, like whatever, right? Like Spain pick roll, everything. None of it matters if you can't beat your first, like if you can't beat your first guy. And you can see it so much, and everyone will call it, oh, the offense looks stagnant. Like they'll use all these words to describe the problems that they think they're seeing. It's like, oh, that's stagnant. There's no one's moving. There's no ball movement. None of that can happen, or it's near impossible for it to happen if you don't have a couple guys who can beat their guy. It doesn't matter. Run all the actions in the world you want. You'll never get anywhere. And that is the Nets' main problem. They have basically one guy who can beat his man, Cam Thomas. And even he's like not super consistent at it. Right? And so after that, yeah, they just lack it. They lack it in such a glaring way that almost like anybody would be an upgrade. Like in terms of running the point guard.
Is Ben Simmons going to be a net by the end of the year next year?
Okay. I think he will be. I've had many arguments with people about like I hate to even use this word, but the value of his contract, right? Like there's a contingent of people out there that think just because it expires, it has value. I don't really see it that way. It might be an instrument by which you can, make trades happen, but it has no value to it. So maybe we're just like semantics at this point. Like we're just arguing semantics about like value compared to, an instrument. I think he's going to be on the team because I think that when they try to trade him, other teams are going to demand to take more because they're taking that contract. Right. And it's going to end up being an overpay. And if there's ways that that's going to overpay, it could also be having his contract tied to stuff. The contract's among the worst in basketball. The only reason it's not is because it ends. Like the only reason something like Bradley Beal's contract and maybe like Levine's contract or some of these other ones aren't worse is because those don't seem to end anytime soon. At least Simmons' ends. And so I think that they probably just ride it out because it's just such a bad contract. That being said, there is a world where they could get off it, but it almost for sure means they're taking back one of those guys I just mentioned, like that has a worse contract, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense for a lot of teams to just take the money even for the rest of the year. I could be wrong about that, but I think they're with it through all the way through the end. Well, I mean, do you think that, or could you see them trading him? It's really hard for me to see it. Again, I've been wrong about this stuff before, though.
I totally agree with you in that he's probably going to be in a net towards the end of next year. I totally disagree with you that there is value to it, but the way like you said, this might be semantics, but what do you go? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You have to find the team that has that quote unquote worst contract that you could swap with. I could see a team that maybe just wants to reset and they see the Ben Simmons contract as a way to reset their roster. You get rid of the 40 million clean, you give the Nets a first rounder or two. But if it's not a scenario like that, man, what are they going to do? Are they going to stretch him? Do you want that 40 million stretched out after you just waited all this time to get off it? I can't really see that happening at all.
This is why I don't want them to attach anything. This is why this is a part of why I want them to just ride it out. Is like, look, you made the mistake. It sucks. It worked out as bad as possible. It's over. And just let it end. Don't at this point, like you've already been through the worst of it. Like you had to trade Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving because of it, basically. Not really, but kind of, right? Like you basically had to let those guys go because of it. You had to basically just sit on it all season long, okay, and ship a number 3 overall pick to Houston because he couldn't really play. And when you have a $40 million guy not play, your team stinks almost always. And at this point, you're so close to the end that overpaying to get rid of it, to me, would be another mistake. But because I mean, you don't trust he's going to come back and contribute on the court at this point, right? I mean, I know there's some people that still have this like blind faith in this thing. I kind of was down on it going into this season and caught a ton of flack, but well, not a ton of flack. People disagree with it, but it was right. I mean, it's the right in the worst way. I hate being right about that stuff, but it just played out kind of predictably. And now I just don't see it playing out any other way. So I just don't, you can't trust it on the court at all. I say ride it out, get out clean and just start over, but don't like attach a pick to it or anything. That would feel way worse.
It feels like you're doubling down if you do that, right?
Totally. Like you already made the mistake. The mistake's done. You screwed up. Okay. There's nothing that you can't undo it at this point. At this point, just let it ride off. I don't think they'll stretch him though. I think that's definitely not the direction they want to go because they don't want to. They want to keep again that money as clean as possible. Just have it end, and they can't buy him out either because he'll never accept it. Nor would I, by the way. If I was him, I wouldn't accept the buyout either. Like no way, pay it all. Like there's no way. So that's where I think that I think he's there all the way through the end of the season, but maybe some other teams, one man's trash is another man's treasure. I'm not sure.
If the Nets could make one move this offseason, you're the GM for one move. What's the move?
Okay, if the Rockets came back to you with the full boat and said we're still willing to do it, all the picks back for Mikal Bridges, I would do it in a heartbeat. That I don't know if it exists. I don't know if it ever existed. Seems like it was at least close, right? Like whatever the different reporting is, some deal that was close to that existed. I still would do that. I still think that's where this team is sort of should be headed. And it really sucks as a fan. And by the way, you're like this too, probably. Everyone's like, well, why would you root for like them to be bad? I can guarantee you, outside of the team themselves, very few other people are like affected monetarily by the team being bad. I know for a fact that I'm affected monetarily by the team being bad. The reason I know this is when the team is good, a lot more people listen to the podcast. And when the team is bad, a lot fewer people listen to the podcast. So to argue for the team to be bad is like basically saying, just going to make less money this year. But I actually think that counts. I feel like my opinion counts for more because of that. And so like, I still think based on sort of who they have, that they have a chance to like, if they had a chance to sort of like have generational number of assets going forward, their own picks plus these other ones they have, I still would go for that. But I just don't think it's realistic. Short of that, I would say the one move that they should try to make is to not overpay for a guy like Claxton. To just try to understand the market. Don't get themselves into like a bind going forward. So one's a small one. The Claxton thing's small. That's like arguing a few $1 million. And then, but the other one is that I still am I still would explore the Bridges thing only for the Rockets package, though. No, not for anyone else. I wouldn't trade him to anywhere else for their future picks. I would only do it where you can control a little bit your own draft slot. So that's the move I would do.
I'm gonna make an argument for your decision actually. Also, the way that I see it, if we run this course with the Bridges, Claxton, Cam Johnson like type roster, I don't know where that's going. I feel like there's a lot more potential for long-term success and long-term winning if you would do that deal, getting your picks back and maybe getting into the lottery next year. Maybe you get one of right. Like I feel like you have a lot more control of what you're doing. You don't have to worry about Phoenix. You know, right now where you're looking at where I don't know if you do it. I look at Phoenix's games almost every day in the season. What if you don't get the superstar in 2025? Then you're really in a situation of like, what do we do next?
Well, they're going to get someone, and it's just going to be it's going to depend on like the disappointment level possibly around who that guy is, right? Because like this is not the perfect example, but are you going to get Giannis because he's unhappy and now you have a boatload to pay for him, or are you going to just like overpay for Brandon Ingram because he's kind of available and the Penguins don't want him back, right? Like these are the kinds of things that happen. Like someone will land on the team because they're going to have cap space and they're going to be able to sign someone. It's just the difference of who those somebodies are, and that's the problem. And so, again, they're never going to trade Bridges. He represents everything. He represents the anti-Durant thing, and I get it. Like no one values him more than they do because he means something even more than basketball at this point to the organization. He represents the end of that era. So they'll never be able to try to like recoup. They'll never be able to get full value because he's more valuable because of that. But I stand resolute that the only way to, in their current situation, in their like one of the few ways that they could get like generationally better would be to go back to rip it all down to the studs. Yeah. But you got to be. It's hard to sell. It's hard to sell tickets about that. It's hard to sell 5 more years of pain. It's hard to sell the owner on stuff like that. It's just hard to sell it. So I get why you don't, but I don't know. I think if you had a GM that came in that was not worried about his or her job, I think that's the first thing they would do. Like, I think that's the first. I think if they were like, hey, do whatever you want, whatever you think is correct. Don't worry about how many tickets we sell. Don't worry about the talk shows. Don't worry about the fans. What do you think is just correct for making the team great 6 years from now? That's what most GMs would do, but that's not how the world works, really. So, like, I don't think that's why I don't think it's like likely to happen.
I agree. I definitely agree. All right, let's get some plugs out for you before we close this down.
All right, yeah, Locked On Nets. Up on YouTube every single day, like you said, 5 days a week talking Nets. And my name on Twitter, Doug Norrie. And I would say half the things I tweet are serious, and the other half are like wildly sarcastic. And I'm going for like a mix of those two things, and hopefully you can try to see the difference between the two. But anyway, yeah, Doug Norrie on Twitter, and then Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. You can follow me at NetsFansYouKnow on Twitter. Obviously, if you're watching this, you're on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Have a good day. Have a great night. Let's go Nets.